start here. Our agenda for tonight is actually going to be chronologically organized. And let me know if I need the mic.
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to talk about are ways to sort of get information about positions that are open, some resources. Then we'll go through the application process. We'll also then go through some tips and sort of steps through the interviewing process. So if we're unfamiliar with at what point of interest you guys have, so we'll break at each step. If you guys have questions, we'll just have it open for everybody to sort of ask, all right? So,
So the impetus behind this is, we've just heard from a number of part-time faculty, is what are the kinds of things that you're looking for in full-time faculty, what are some of the differences, and we really want this to be the start of a conversation with adjunct faculty. We really want to help you all build the skills that are needed to land a full-time job here or somewhere else. And that's really in our interest to try to build that capacity. So really, any questions you have or things you're curious about or training that you're interested in, just feel free to ask.
So the first stage, obviously, is how do I know that there are positions open? And the standard, the gold standard in higher ed is obviously going to be, maybe not so obviously, the Chronicle of Higher Education, which sorts things by state. You can look by state, you can look at community colleges. There's also the state board, lists all of the positions open in disciplines throughout the state. There are some benefits of being mobile. So obviously we have limited options if you are place-bound. So those are some of the things that you might want to consider when you go onto the market. There are also very specific trade journals that would be listing for your specific area. So in English, which is my discipline, we pretty much stick with the Chronicle of Higher Education. Some do like NCTE, that type of stuff, but those specifics, if you have questions, is there a trade journal that works for me? You can talk to your discipline coordinator or us. So Tom, did you want to add to that?
The state board site.
State board.
Yeah, so the state board site has all the jobs for all the community colleges in the state, all the full-time jobs.
We at Pierce College are expecting positions to be listed this year. So part of it is not just preparing you guys, keeping you informed of the resources that you have here, but we want you to be professionally developed and have the confidence to go out and earn a full-time position if this is a jumping off point. Okay. All right, so the next stage then is the application process. So you want to lead this one and I'll jump in?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's been a long day.
For stage one,
5 minutes.
can we assume that a job here will be posted on the email here?
No.
No, you want to look at the website, and then the state board site will have that as well.
Yeah, don't rely on your coordinator or your dean to let you know of positions opening up in the division or the departments.
So cover letter, CV, teaching philosophy. How many of you have applied for full-time jobs? Okay, so most people. So you're familiar with a lot of this. How many of you have got an interview for a full-time job at a college? Okay. And then how many of you have held a full-time job at a community college, university? Nobody? Okay. All right.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it? No one raised their hand? No, we've all gone through it and nothing happened.
Yeah, right.
And we're going to help with that process too, to help.
Yeah.
Pointers.
So.
The magic bullet.
Well, yeah, and we'll try to work on that, and you can ask questions or throw things out. You guys know this is a competitive process. If we advertise one position, we can get over 50 applicants. We get 100 applicants for one position.
Over 130 applications for the English last time.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. That's going to be across the board what happens at colleges. They're great jobs, and they can be very, very competitive pools.
So give yourself 100 shots at it before you feel discouraged.
Okay, so that said, one of the things, when picture yourself, you're on a hiring committee, and you got to look at 100 plus applicants. So, a red flag or something that will hinder a second look is that cover letter that was written for 4 applications ago and has been recycled, right? So take some time and really address what the position is about in that cover letter, and take some time to look at what that college, look at their mission statement, look at some of the data from that college, you know, really figure out what's going on at that college specifically. Because that'll say, hey, that tells the committee that you're really interested in that college and what they're doing, right? And you really took the time to research the position. So, you know, that's really key. And if, you know, another thing, that cover letter is the only example we're probably going to get of your writing ability. So it's got to be impeccable. You know, have 6 people read that thing over, because if there's any kind of grammar error, we're not going to get a writing sample during the interview. And writing is a huge part of a full-time faculty member's job. You spend a tremendous amount of time writing. So that's really key.
There are different traditions in the different disciplines. So if you are applying for something in the humanities, you should have a paragraph formatted cover letter. It's not a bulleted list. That is not the standard in the humanities. And that's something that could work perhaps in business, does not transfer over to humanities. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at different models about how to do things, see if you can get very specific discipline expectations. And something I think that Tom and I want to offer to everyone here, if you have questions like that, like, we can certainly provide you feedback on those specific details. So it's easy to weed things out by those processes. Yeah, we expect full-time humanities faculty to be demonstrating their writing ability. That's not the same expectation for other disciplines. Would you expect that for math?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really it's our chance to see the writing, you know. And we've had failed searches. Greg and I were on a committee where we had a failed search because the writing samples were not what we wanted.
So buddy up with an English faculty.
Yeah, seriously, it's just that's really crucial. Another thing that's really crucial is there's usually some kind of an essay question or two, and that's not a generic teaching statement. You know, a lot of people have a teaching statement that they can fire off for multiple applications, and oftentimes there's a very specific question that's asking something that the committee wants to know about. So really take some time to answer that question specifically. Again, the generic answer about a teaching philosophy is probably not going to be good enough.
Something also to think about, so we're sort of talking a bit about the cover letter, but a lot of institutions are doing those online application things that ask for the same information that your curriculum vitae has. You should not say CV. You should do the work, put in the information. It shows you're committed to the position. So you're saying, yeah, I know, I just copy and paste it over. You know? So we're looking for people who put in that extra work. All right, so even if it's exactly the same, then just do that work of copying and pasting over.
What else do we have here? CV, do you want to talk about the CV a little bit?
Sure. So there are different traditions in the CV as well. For higher education, you should be leading with your education. That should be on the first page, front and center. On my CV, that is the first category. Like, these are my degrees. And then I go down to what are my experiences related to teaching, because that's the position. You might also then, once you get through those pieces, cover the other elements of a full-time position. Advising, committee work, any of that kind of work that you can highlight is appropriate for the CV. I'm trying to think of other things that might show up. Language is important in the humanities, so if you do have another language, those are always benefits. Are there other things that show up?
You know, one thing, a lot of people in the sciences will have really strong research backgrounds, and that's great, but that can also be a little bit of a red flag if you're at a community college, because if in your application process you're talking about the research and how you love your research and you want to keep doing your research, that's great, but it's going to make the committee wonder, are they really committed to teaching? Right? Because teaching, you know as a part-timer that's what we do. We're really focused on teaching, and for a full-time faculty member, that's going to take up all your time, and there's not going to be support for your lab, and it's going to be difficult to continue to do a lot of that scientific research. So we really look for people that really emphasize teaching, in all of their documents. And that's really something that that needs to be evident, and evidence of kind of a continual interest in learning about teaching, and getting better at teaching, and trying to improve in teaching.
Tara had a question.
You said to lead with education. Would you include professional development in that, like education and professional development advising committees, or would you put that somewhere else?
I think your credential, your degree is of primary importance, and then the other stuff goes sort of after the teaching part. So it's that credential, the teaching focus, and then the other piece. Because the priority for a community college position will be teaching first. And like Tom was saying, what makes candidates stand out is how they talk about teaching, how they talk about students in the classroom, how they talk about learning. When that's a clear message that comes through all three of those documents, then that's a candidate that we have confidence in taking to the next stage. So that message of who am I as an instructor is, when it's really clear, it shines through 130 applications.
And this is the last presentation of the long day of presentations. So really, the emphasis should be on learning and student learning, and how do you look at student learning as much as what you're doing to improve your performance in the classroom as a teacher. Yeah.
How do you look upon extracurricular activities as being a part of CE?
I think if they're relevant, it's nice to get a glimpse of the interest that somebody has, but it needs to stay pretty professional, I think.
Yeah, when it shows service to community, that you're involved and engaged community member, those things are good. That I like to watch TV and walk my dog or something, that's not going to help you. Right, but if you're a volunteer for a certain organization that's connected, like you read at the library for students or something, that's definitely appropriate.
Yeah, definitely those things that show broader commitment to community.
Yeah.
Holly, I'm interested in your perception, and possibly yours too, Tom, either one of you. You have had to look at, say, 130 applications. When you see that the person has received their degree 20 some odd years ago, 30 some odd years ago, I know you're shaking your head, but what I really want to know, since we're in here, does that send a flag? Does that say to you, this person's older? You can't do that, we know that. But we are an ageist society, and a lot of my colleagues who have tried and tried and tried for tenured positions, the last thing a colleague said to me goes, I just guess I'm just not good enough after his 5th tenure try. And I was just so saddened. I carried that with me, and I'm thinking,
Well, that's not his
you're not
degree,
good?
or
What?
her degree. That wouldn't be the age of the person's degree.
No. But what is it that's sending, I know he's great. I mean, he teaches, and I've been teaching with him. I know he's great. So, tell me what you think.
Well, let me answer the first and then answer the other sort of in general. So the age of the degree is not relevant in the humanities at all. I mean, many of these degrees are actually more relevant if they're older. So there might be other areas, maybe like computer science, that would be more appropriate to have a newer degree, but that's never anything that I've ever looked at. And not even just for the ageism, it just doesn't, yeah. The prestige of the institution does matter. I mean, that carries some weight.
You really think so?
If there is an institution that has an exceptional program in composition and rhetoric, we're going to know that on the committee. If we're hiring for composition and rhetoric, that matters. The generic sort of other thing, I think it's amazing I think Tom and I have insight. There are exceptional faculty in this room that we work with that we know a lot about that don't show well on paper. And that's part of why we want to have these types of events, that we want you to be what is seen on the paper. And that's unfortunate. So I think that could be, I don't know this person's situation,
I'm
but
suspecting that might
there's
be
a
it.
frustration there that I've been at this for so long, and it's generally because their awesomeness isn't on the page.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
And really, the age part really doesn't matter. I mean, you look at just the search process that we went through. I mean, It really isn't what we're looking at. We're looking at continuous improvement. We're looking at someone that's engaged in learning, and looking at learning and improving, and we can see evidence of a continuous process of improving in the classroom and being more successful with students. That's what really carries the weight, and that could be somebody that's 65 or 45. We really don't pay attention to that. We're really looking for that history of skills, and skills are going to make somebody successful with students.
How does that show on the page?
It's the way you talk about what you do. So if you tell me in your cover letter, I've been trying 5 times to get a full-time job, that is not a good way to sell yourself to me, right? But if you say, these are the ways that I continue to grow and develop as a faculty member that match the needs that you've just shared with me in your job description, then that starts to sound a little bit more enticing.
Any observations about when the teaching position represents a sort of a career change from what you previously been doing? For instance, I practiced law for 25 years before I discovered the joy of teaching, and decided intentionally to become an instructor rather than a lawyer. I have all this background experience in education that it doesn't quite exactly fit the new direction.
That's the cover letter. So your story and your path to this position that shows your passion for student learning and teaching, that is where you want to give that information. So if you feel as though your CV shows a weird shift or something that you want to explain, the cover letter is the place to do that. And it's not what you lead with, it's what you close with. So you give them all, these are how I meet your needs exactly. And then you say, you would just explain that path towards the end, once you've already sold them on yourself.
Just as a side, I got my master's, took a break, worked in commercial real estate of all things for like 3 years before I came back to teaching. But even in that, I was still teaching. I always ended up being the person training somebody on new software or whatever, because it is my passion. So I put that in my cover letter so that they know this is my passion, and so I'm going to be teaching no matter where I'm at.
Yeah, and again, it's that passion that is just so crucial that we're trying to look for. And again, one of the ways that really shows is putting a lot of time and effort to looking at what is the mission of that college, and what are the things that they're working on, and what are some of their indicators of student success, and looking at some of the statistics of the demographics of the students, and putting that kind of thing in there shows, man, I am really interested in knowing about those students and how to make those students succeed, or help them to succeed very specifically. They really focused on the people that are going to be in that classroom.
Part of the things that we've been covering tonight also are things that making you aware of the culture of higher education and the language that we're using, and ways for you to sort of identify with these movements, assessment movements, being aware of assessment, being familiar with it, being able to talk about your experience with it. That's an excellent thing to bring up on your CV, as well as whenever you'll see it in the job descriptions under what are the expectations of the job. Other ones would be developmental education nationally is something people are paying attention to. So if you're in math or English, your willingness, your desire, your passion to teach students who struggle, that is an X factor that you want to communicate to the person who is going to be hiring. Right? So those things matter, and they show that you're dialed in.
Yeah, absolutely. If we get a cover letter and say, I really love teaching calculus, but I'm not sure about teaching those pre-college, well, who are our students, right? You got to focus on who is going to be in the classroom in that college. You have to really show that you're interested in working with the students that you're going to be meeting. So, yeah, that's really key. Do you want to go on to experience?
Yeah, do you guys have any other questions about this piece? What do you put on paper to get?
It's the first step, and it's really, really important.
Jake?
Should you emphasize or state if you have experience pulling full-time load? If you've been teaching, what's the equivalent of a full-time load previously? How do you do that tactfully?
Yeah, again, I think that's something that is worth noting, that if you have somebody with a ton of experience and someone with no experience, and the person with no experience really talks about how they're gonna help the students at that college, and they're really focused on the students at that college. You know, that, I mean, that needs to be included too, all that experience, certainly, and that, but it's also how you talk about that experience. You know, I help students succeed in these ways.
You can get to that on the CV by describing the curriculum you've instructed over a certain amount of time without highlighting.
Do you agree with the advice I've seen to try to keep your CV to 1 page?
No.
No?
You know, that,
Well,
that's
they
a,
can't
you
have it
know,
in English and humanities, that's possible.
the question was, is it best practice to have a one-page CV? And it might be in business or other things, but in academia, we want to know everything you've done on that. Yeah, or be able to, you know, dig back and
I think once you're
a
getting
lot
on,
of what you've done.
How far back should we go? I mean, I'm probably the youngest guy in the room. I mean, some of us have careers back to the 70s.
So it's not a resume, it shouldn't have everything, but it should have everything you've ever done that's relevant. So if you've taught for 30 years, that's relevant. Now, a new instructor might have a page describing the very different courses they've taught, where an experienced instructor might have a description of a position as opposed to the courses. Does that make sense? So the amount of time that you spend on it would be different. So a new instructor who doesn't have as many courses or as much experience might spend more time explaining what was in the curriculum on the CV, or an experienced person might just sort of gloss over that, say, I've taught economics through blah, blah, blah. You know, it would be a little bit more summative. Once you get past 5 pages, though, you're starting to, yeah, 130 applications, guys. So.
If we have support links that would kind of illustrate from students, say for instance, I had a student participate in an online class of mine, and then they went on to film this piece for the school talking about their experience. It was very complimentary. Is that something that you would include a link to on the CV, or is that inappropriate?
So we don't often go off the application thing.
We're getting a signal from HR here.
Absolutely, no. We read the material that you provide to us. We don't really go out external. But what I want to share with you is that what that tells me is that you're bragging on a student, and that's what gets me excited about something like that, not that there's a link out there that I would follow. So that's the spirit that I feel from that, and bragging on students is a great thing. That, you know, I'm really proud of these accomplishments of my students. That's something that will resonate in a cover letter.
So you would offer anecdotes of particular situations that you've had, or not so much in a cover letter?
I remember cover letters I've read years ago that have student anecdotes that were very meaningful.
Okay.
And those people got interviews.
Okay.
Don't make it 3 pages. Yeah, but a story that resonates with you, that speaks to why you're a teacher, ugh. I mean, I've wept at cover letters, so it's effective.
Did they get hired?
well, the letter gets you in the door. Your personality and how you express that beyond the page is the next step.
So any other questions on kind of the written materials and general, yeah?
Some of the online applications allow you to add additional files. Do you ever see extra that's more than that's been asked for? And
Yeah, that's a place if you do have a teaching philosophy that you've developed. I've seen those attached in addition to. But it's not a requirement.
So that's there's a specific, we use the NeoGov system, which is a statewide system. So if you've started an application in that system, it saves your data. The HR will edit what we see as a hiring committee. We won't see everything you've ever turned in that system. So I'm not sure if they edit based on, would you edit out additional information they
There's a
submit?
place to attach other
Yes,
things,
if
right?
there's additional information that it was not asked for in the job posting.
You turn it
we
off.
will redact that
Yeah.
information.
What we see as additional information, generally the transcript is the additional information that we asked for, or the additional question. Those are the pieces that are above and beyond for us. But other institutions might be asking for something else, and that might be floating around in the NeoGov system.
yeah, the reason I ask is I know one full-timer who submitted 3 different versions of a cover letter, and one was a newsletter, and it was it was kind of humorous, and I just wondered if that would just be superfluous. in this situation.
Everybody has to be on an even playing field.
Yeah.
So.
We try to level it as
that's the
much as
way that we, that we take them in and we accept them and we present them to a screening committee and then
So when you're first looking at initial applications, and that does include transcripts, are you always expecting to see official transcripts even in the first round?
No, we don't expect that. I think it's beneficial for you to have a copy of an official one that you just always use electronically, a PDF of one. But we expect you to provide that if we get any further. So it's not, that's not like a factor that we think, oh, we're not bringing it in because they don't have an official. That doesn't happen. We assume you're not lying about that.
Well, do you look for certain courses on the transcripts? How deep do you go in that?
Each committee is different. As a dean on a committee, as someone who would later be credentialing this person, I dive pretty detailed into that transcript. So I don't do that on the first step. That's generally the group that we are considering to offer interviews to. So then we start diving in and saying, yeah, and that can help me decide whether or not.
Let's say that on the transcripts, they're from several different institutions, and maybe the education shows a sort of stop and start. Does that come up as a flag?
It didn't for me. I think that's pretty common. It'll be increasingly common. We have people that go to multiple institutions.
Yeah, I've never.
Yeah, it's really going to be those things that we talked about that are going to be the biggest things that are factors. We wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things you can do as an adjunct to help, build some of the skills that you need as a full-time person. One of them is if there's committees or other things you can get involved with. I know a lot of people are teaching a class here and teaching a class there, and there's just no time. But that really is a great way to learn about how these kinds of institutions work. And learn about things like assessment, learn about things like what we're doing with Achieving the Dream. That's just, it shows that you're really interested in building the skill set you need as a full-time faculty member, because as a full-time faculty member, it's not just teaching classes. There's a lot of governance that's part of that. It's a big part of the workload. There's a lot of advising. So figuring out ways to learn about the advising process and to think about addressing that in your cover letter is important as well. But if there's always opportunities to pick a committee here that you can serve on, and that's just a great way to learn about what it means to be a full-time faculty member.
So I'm kind of a committee junkie, but I've never been involved in the advising process. So I mean, how do you get involved in that?
Yeah, that's a trickier one, but that's go ahead.
And I think this is transitioning into our interview stage too. So what you should anticipate so we have phone, Skype, that's sort of that first, and people are back and forth. So we Skype, other institutions do phone interviews still at that level. So you should expect a variety based in the world. And then the personal interview. You should expect questions that go beyond teaching to the advising and to the sort of committee or commitment to discipline, college, those pieces. And those are those other elements of a full-time position. And those are the places where part-time faculty sometimes don't prepare. And that's where it would show. Like, oh, I haven't been able to do those things because I'm just teaching so much. So finding ways to get some experience that you can market as that is appropriate. So knowing your institutions or the one that you're applying to, what their degree looks like. So go to their catalog, figure out what their degree is, and figure out where you fit into it based on your discipline. Understand that. Advising doesn't have to be formal transfer advising. So most of us as instructors have had meaningful interactions with students that have made a difference in their lives, that have shaped them in some way. So those are ways to sort of talk about advising, coaching them to take other courses, or coaching them for decisions in their life, or other courses that they want to take. Those conversations, packaging those as advising and saying, well, these are really the things I've had the opportunity to do, and I'd love to do more. That's how we want to hear that, as opposed to, I haven't had any opportunity to do anything. Well, I know there's some in there, you just need to give it to me. So we don't expect part-time faculty to have, I advise 40 students and I don't want any money for that. That's not, we don't want you to say that. But we want you to be thinking about, okay, I understand that's part of a full-time job. So what have I done that demonstrates I have that skill set? And tell us that. That's what we're looking for. And same with the committee service stuff. So, even just participating in events like this shows your commitment to the profession, that you want to understand the culture, that you're committed to being in higher education, selling that type of participation that you do. And if you want to do more, I think that the most marketable thing we have to offer to you is assessment opportunities and ATD. Those are the ones that are going to look beautiful on anyone's resume.
Don't forget QM.
And quality matters. That's old. We've already done that. That's so last year.
That's making me sound old, nothing.
But that really is, that's just something that
it really is important to think about how you would make that transition from a part-time faculty position to a full-time faculty position where there's a commitment to the community of your discipline in the department, to the college, and in many cases, a commitment to the larger community. So how do you represent your discipline and the college in those different settings as a full-time faculty member?
Sort of the non-tangible is that what that shows us on the committees, you understand the work outside of teaching, that you get it, that it's not just, oh, I'm going to teach less and then I just have office hours and stuff. This would be great. I don't have to drive down the road and teach at another place. Oh, that's awesome. So that you get that it's a lot more work besides the classroom. And we want to, before we extend a position to someone, to know that that's what we're bringing you on board for, not just the teaching in the classroom. That's a huge part of it. But we want exceptional faculty in all of those areas. Do you have questions about this part? Or how you get to that place? Yeah?
Do you need a doctorate degree to get there?
No.
We didn't hear that.
You do not need a doctorate to get a full-time teaching position at a community college, at least not this one.
all those other things we've been talking about are that's what.
Although there are some problems with the degree inflation, I understand, where the PhD market is like, oh boy, look at these great PhDs. But the problem also with PhD is like, what's a long-term commitment versus research? It's kind of
Right.
6 of one, half
Right.
a dozen of the other.
Yeah, many of our PhD candidates struggle with marketing themselves because they're leading with that research piece that works great for your college, but shows a lack of understanding of what the community college system needs. We want people who focus on student engagement and learning.
And when you look at those job descriptions, they
They
tend to
will
be
tell
pretty
you.
long. Address those things that are in that job description, because they're going to tell you what the committee's looking for.
Is it appropriate to have a cover letter that's more than a page?
Yes,
I hear that.
it is appropriate to have a cover letter that is more than a page. I would base it on how long their job description is. If they're verbose in their job description, then I would match that. If they're really short, then you might want to trim yours because they're clearly sending you a message of brevity. A lot of it is matching what they ask for to what you have to offer, that match piece.
Okay. Hopeful so far? Right, so we want to talk a little bit about Skype interviews and and grounded interviews. What happens at that phase?
So, did you have any general thoughts on Skype interviews you wanted to share?
I think good guidance for Skype interviews is not to be in a busy place or even busy stuff behind you. Be professional, present yourself professionally. Be prepared for failure, like the system's failure. Like, oh, we lost the connection. All right. So one of the most impressive things I've seen is someone who can sort of just recover from that. That's impressive to us. But if you're thrown completely off, then you're a victim of circumstance. So you know how it is being in the classroom. You have plan X planned out. So that's what we would like to see demonstrated. But yeah, professional. I think they have other kind of things, like push it up so you're not looking down, move it up, and that kind of stuff. Do a test run.
I can give a quick
tip, we just started really doing Skype interviews, it's kind of a neat thing, but there were a number of people that I interviewed this year that put all kinds of interesting things. I mean, they used it to their advantage. They just put a background. They put, okay, here's this model that my students built.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just really took it as an advantage to point to something as they were being interviewed. It was clever.
Is the Skype interview required even for a local person?
Skype required for a local person, yes. Our process is to have everybody do the same thing. So, and that's standard. So you would telephone everybody, even if they're in the office next to you. You would Skype everyone, even if they're in the office next to you. And we've done that. So our internals would be Skyped, and we wouldn't know where they are. But they could be down the hall.
So what were our ratios on interviews this year? Was it 8 to 3, 8 Skypes to 3 grounded? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So take 150 interviewees, and then, applicants. It's getting way past my bedtime.
Yeah.
And then bring that down to about 8 people being Skyped, and then bringing about 3 people to the campus for a more extensive interview per position. So
what brings the 8 down to 3?
Yeah, and that's going to come down to really what happens in that interview process with answering those questions. And again, it's going to be the same kinds of things. What's the focus on teaching and learning? How are those things answered? What kinds of, one of the things that you really should, and I'm sure a lot of you do, is think up a bunch of examples and have them ready to go in your head of scenarios of where you've been successful with students or where you've helped out a student that you can plug into that interview.
Details make the difference.
Yeah, and especially if you can just really quickly pull out a story of how you helped a student overcome some really formidable obstacle, that's the kind of thing that really stands out in those interviews. Right, so have some, you can kind of anticipate if you've been through a few interviews, you can anticipate what some of the questions what they're going to be, and try to come up with general examples that are useful to really strengthen what you're talking about.
I was going to add to that because I've been through a few of these interviews, and your audience on the other side can't see what you're doing. So you can have notes, you can have a flip chart with, notes, to help you through, because you're going to be nervous, and so, just, to be more successful, just be more prepared, just like it would be if you were presenting in the class.
Yeah, and I've done those types of preparations for a campus interview as well, and had those notes with me in my bag just as sort of refreshers. It's not unusual to have a notepad while you are interviewing with a committee, so that's perfectly appropriate. Flipping around a lot will look a little weird, but having some things that you can just go to that as preparation if you get nervous, that's key.
And do just a tremendous amount of research on the institution. And before you go to that interview, just pour through their websites and learn as much as you can about that school. Just so you can demonstrate when you're answering the questions, you can use specifics that apply to that incident.
Concrete specifics will make you stand out and make a difference. Make us feel like you've researched, make it look like you've prepared for this work and you're ready.
A lot of part-time work seems like it's pretty isolated. You don't have a lot of colleague interactions, but that seems to be an important part of a full-time position. So do you have advice for how to get that? I mean, it sounds like the Center for Engagement and Learning would be a great opportunity, but what other ways can we get colleague interactions?
All of our divisions have monthly meetings that part-time faculty are welcome to join. So you will get those through your email, through Pierce email, so you're aware of them. And even just that level of participation, I think, is relevant, that you worked with your division or your department, that you go to these meetings, that's that going above and beyond, that you can then demonstrate to the market.
And yeah, that's a great way to start building those relationships with the full-time faculty members. And if you can get to know a full-time faculty member and ask them questions about the institution, that's a great way to learn.
And
department meetings, so biology, math, whatever it is, attend those meetings and participate. If you can, that's a great way to learn more.
we have some innovations happening that are discipline specific as well. So being able to participate in those help you. And our full-time faculty are excited, and they want other people excited about these things. And they already have a full-time job, so they're happy to share that information with people. So initiatives that, like iTrans, iBest, those sort of outreach pieces that help students transition, those are marketable. Selling those, saying, you know, I'm in this outreach program, or I co-teach with somebody, or I'm in a learning community with someone, or I developed a learning community. Those are not off limits to you guys as part-time faculty. So we excited about those. Sharon did. Other questions that you guys have about interviewing? Things that can be done. So one of the things, so Tom and I wanted to do this because we saw that we had a lot of part-time faculty interested in employment, and we want to be an institution that people go to get that development. And we're happy to support you if you're with us as a full-time person or someplace else. So also cultivating a relationship with your dean and developing relationships to get recommendations, awesome. So make sure people are observing you teach, that you have that on, that you feel good about that, and that you can call upon them to act as a reference for someone who's observed your teaching. Because for full-time teaching, that's going to be what we preference. Supervisor and teaching observation. Those are the types of references we go to. And I am more than happy to do that for faculty. And your chairs are as well.
Trying to think. My brain's getting really mushy, but what other things would be helpful for you all? What are the kinds of things that you might find helpful? I know that some schools have run like institutes for part-time faculty. What are the kinds of things that we can do through the SEAL or other places that would help you guys? And we would really like to be able to grow a lot of really successful full-time faculty right here. Just have people transition successfully. So what are the kinds of things that you would like to see?
What access do we have to development opportunities? I've seen several things come through on emails that I would have liked to gone to. I'm not sure.
Do you have lunch?
Yeah, there we go. Well,
We're
to
all
which I
in
would
the
have liked to
post-8:30 excuse.
But these cost out of pocket, do we have any access to something to support us for those?
Well, I mean, your first step, if you're interested in something, is contact your dean, and we can see what's available, how much things cost, and then we can talk to Joanne, and we can talk to Emily, and find out. And you know, those are the kinds of things that we're really trying to invest more in as an institution, because you guys really are the backbone of this institution. A very large percentage of our classes are taught by adjunct faculty. We need to make sure that we're investing in your training, because it's really investing in the institution.
The first step is to speak to the coordinator and the dean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and we can at least get you going in the right direction. I mean, if it's a week-long training in Zurich, we might have trouble with that.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Tom, let me just add, one of the things we requested in this budget cycle is professional development funding for part-time faculty. We've had a process where you kind of get, full-time faculty have an allotted amount, and then if there's money left, then you have access to that. And we've gone to a universal professional development funding request form, so that doesn't look different for part-time or full-time faculty, and the channels for the school, that are the same. So I think we're getting closer to having that dedicated access. The trade-off that my administrative had is, we might invest a lot in you, and you have no commitment to us. And so that's the piece. So we send you to Zurich, and then you take a job in Zurich, and there's like $500 down the drain. And so that's kind of weighing, is it benefit the institution, your professional development, not just you? And so that's kind of a criteria.
So we might then ask for you to
Share
that
that
back. To bring it back. So maybe it's presenting something to your colleagues about what you learned. So we're closing the loop. which is double duty on your CV, that you attended, and then you brought it back and did a presentation. Now you're the resident
Yeah.
expert.
You asked for suggestions. My suggestion would be that you would do your best to include the part-time faculty in events by making, when you plan an event, that you look at the times to make sure that you have the most opportunity to get the most people there. For example, the department meetings. I know that in the past, when I've had a full-time job, there's no way I'm going to be here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I have no opportunity, and I would imagine most adjunct are like that. So looking at those kind of small things, but really would be a big thing for us.
Yeah, and that's tricky. And that's certainly something that we can talk to department coordinators about and try to figure out. Because you have full-time faculty that are here all day, and they're they're wanting to get home. So yeah, it's tricky, but that's a good suggestion.
What about a resume cover letter workshop? Just, for another set of eyes, a set of eyes that actually see the light.
Okay, yeah. I mean, those are the kinds of things we're asking, we want to know about, because we need to start putting things in place that'll be helpful. So that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, November, December is when things start heating up on the application wagon. So that's when perhaps it would be appropriate for SEAL to sort of host a gathering of you guys to maybe be resources for one another. That might be a good thing to do. We start to, the deans are limited in how much we can help you when they are specific to us. So we would not be able to do detailed work with you on Pierce applications because we serve on those committees. But I mean, the purpose of this is more generic. How do you present yourself on the market? So I think that the best situation would be to rely upon your peers for that piece. And even maybe some full-time faculty who have gotten jobs recently could be appropriate for that. So. Yes. Oh, sorry. 1 and then 2. How's that?
What's so then positions become available November, December here, and then what happens for the rest?
I would say November, December everywhere.
And I would say our timeline might be a little earlier than that this year. That's right?
Yeah.
Pushing for
Did
that.
they hear her question? Did you hear that?
The November, December thing is an expectation nationally. So
Just wait, the budget's for?
Yeah, so we're trying to push our timeline a little bit forward because it's competitive. Believe it or not, even with those 100 applicants, there's going to be people that get multiple job offers that are at the top of those pools. Because they've got it, they've figured out the system. They're very marketable, and so we can actually lose our top pick for a position if somebody else is offering sooner. So there's kind of a it gets earlier and earlier. But we're trying to move ours just a little bit forward for that.
yeah, we don't have any set times in stone, but January, I think, is our goal to have the committees begin the review process. Offers around March, I think, is our goal. We're not sure how that's going to be because we don't know how many positions we have yet or where they are. And plus, we prioritize some that are more competitive, so those might go earlier than some that have less competition, that need more time.
A suggestion I have would be to take chair people from the departments, deans, possible support staff, and mentor part-time faculty for jobs that come up. Is that realistic?
For jobs that would come up at Pierce?
Absolutely. In other words, your group here. I mean, people work with one another, and they know the culture of Pierce College. They've invested, say, 2 years, 10 years, 18 years as adjuncts. So they know the culture. Would it be realistic to say, let me mentor a senior part-time faculty member to go towards a tenure track position? Is that a possibility?
That's a tough one, and I'll let Deborah just stop me at any point. But the danger there is, hopefully we can supply the kinds of experiences
You've seen the
that
commitment
will
that
give
you just talked about. Excuse me, that you just said commitment. what's in it for you? Well, if the person has stayed here that long, there's the commitment.
Right, but in terms of our hiring process, the searches are national. So, I think we'd have to be really careful not to give somebody the expectation, because you went through this mentoring process, that you're going to walk into the job, because they're jobs that people are going to apply from literally from all over the world, from all over the country. And that's probably not going to change. So,
But the culture here, wouldn't it be suited to find, sure, the best candidate?
Yes.
yeah,
But part
absolutely.
of that is,
Absolutely.
yeah, right?
And that's what we do. We try to find the very best candidates. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's what we're trying to do here is start that process. I think that I have certain faculty that I have expressed to me their interest in full-time work. And my job, I think, is showing them opportunities of growth that will get them to a place of like we're talking about here. What can I do to make myself look awesome on the page to get to that stage? What's the market look like? Am I competitive with what I have to offer? And the reality is, it's a highly competitive field out there.
Well,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. But we'd like to think that where we do most of our work is where we call home and where we call our
Yeah.
family. That's where we'd like to think.
no, I get you. I understand. I think that there are ways to sell your knowledge of the institution as a benefit in the application process. But then you also have to balance those other pieces out too. So those are the hard pieces. And if you're interested in that work, I think it's appropriate to say, help me get to that place.
And at the same time.
Here or someplace else.
There's HR on the other side saying there must be a level playing field for all applicants.
Mhm.
So they're kind of dealing with that as well. So you've got both of those pieces, but you're right, and I see what you're saying, and I know they do too. I
Yeah.
absolutely know
Yeah.
that, yeah. But one more thing, in the new NeoGov system, you can put a check mark in some of the boxes that have, that come up and tell you when a position that you are interested in has opened up, so that you're not constantly having to go in there and look. So that's a really nice feature in case you don't know about that.
Where was that again?
That's
In the NeoGov system.
And
Okay.
it will,
The state's.
yeah, and I believe that you can ask for, right off the webpage, you can ask for those notices to come to you. You can pick the jobs.
And I think that also having those conversations with your chairs, with the people in the department, it gives you insight into things that, a culture piece you may not know as a part-time faculty member. So some of the things I shared with people in the English department were, we're looking for generalists. And that's what our job description said, but what that meant was, we want you to see that you're teaching everything from 098 all the way up to lit. And that, again, you're excited, you're able, you're willing, you're energized to do that work. So someone who's coming in with just lit focus was not as desirable as a generalist. So you can get some heads up on what to look for if you're having those conversations. It's in the job description, but people seem to not see the value of those things sometimes. Yeah.
I have two questions. One was the November, December date for the following fall,
Yeah.
and the other was, is there, the Skype capabilities for interviews? Would that be a possibility for some of the meetings that someone could attend remotely?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, or a recorder or something like that. Yeah, I think we're trying to get better at the meetings that are synchronous electronically. And maybe that's something that Karen can help us with all her QM campus experience. Yeah, finding ways to get involvement with people not physically being in the room. I think that's a great experiment for this year. Yeah, because I work at state meetings that do that kind of work, illuminate kind of things. Yeah.
Illuminate's kind of big.
Yeah.
You can get on a delay and then you're.
Right, there might be a way though. You may not get video, but maybe audio and yeah, maybe we can look into that if people are interested in that, if that would mean more participation.
Does he mean like WebEx or something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
Division meetings being synchronously held, like
Yeah,
broadcast
WebEx.
out.
So WebEx would do that.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. I like that.
Yeah.
Use what we have.
Other questions?
Was this worth your time?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing that you're willing to share this information with us. Would you give an overview of the face-to-face, the committee interviewing process, please?
Let's talk about our process this year.
Sure, I'll talk about ours and then I can, why don't you talk about ours?
I'll give you
share
an
ours.
overview. So what we did this year, we really expanded the amount of time we spend with candidates compared to what we've done before, because we just really want to see how they're going to fit into the community and work in departments. So we had started, I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember anymore, but it's getting so late in the day. We started out with campus tours, and then we had a meet and greet with the departments, and anybody from the college could come and meet with the candidate and talk with them. And we actually had a meet and greet on both campuses for almost all of the candidates. There's a ride back and forth with somebody, so there's more time you're spending kind of on. And then there's an interview with the committee, the hiring committee, and then there's an interview with the two vice presidents of learning and student success. So it's a 6-8 hour day. Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry, in a teaching segment. Yeah, absolutely. In a
And
teaching
lunch.
segment as well.
And lunch.
Yeah. And lunch. Right. So
It's
it's
a
a
whole
whole
day.
day. It's a
Yeah.
whole day. So yeah.
Yeah, this day and age, expect a day-long process. You will have a teaching demonstration. You will have an interview with the committee. You will have an interview with some type of administrative group. That will happen regardless of where you go, those three pieces. So be prepared for those. Meet and greets are less common, or with teaching, sometimes it's more common with the administrative, but we do it here. Because we're multi-campus, we may, if it's relevant to your discipline, have you at both campuses. Give you an experience at both campuses. We hire at the district level. We don't always know where you are going to go or where we would like to place you at the time of the interview. So if that's the case, we give you an experience with both campuses, so you understand what you're getting into if you get an offer. Question?
Yeah, for the committee makeup, do you usually have somebody that's outside of the department or the division that's part of the committee?
Yes, and that's standard. We like to have discipline representation. It's majority faculty. And we like to have student services sort of influence in there as well. But there is representation outside of the discipline, too. That's faculty.
And in terms of teaching demos, we're looking for a range of techniques and ability to interact with students in many ways.
Engagement.
Yeah, engaging.
Engage,
how
but make them do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, go ahead.
So on the meet and greets, do you get feedback from members outside of the committee? And does that influence the hiring?
It can.
Not as much as the other components.
If you disrobe, we will know. Even if there's no committee presence there, we will know, yeah, so. But you're interviewing the whole time, even in the informal pieces, so just keep that in mind.
We're at 5 after now, just so you know. So it's about probably time to wind it up unless you have another burning
I'm happy
question.
to answer a few more questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say to you that this has probably been the finest session that you will go to all year. These folks have just shared a lot of fabulous information with you. So
Even
take
though we're
it, take it
barely
in.
standing.
We are-
This is 8 this
This
morning.
is exciting.